Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this month's webinar. Today we are talking about unhostaging your data, reclaiming control from troublesome applications and systems, which is something that we are finding as we talk to many different types of businesses, which seems to be more prevalent, and it's happening more and more often in places where we're storing data. So it's going to be an interesting topic today. So thank you for joining us. For the rest of our series for this year, this will be up on the website by the end of the week for September through to December. Lots of interesting topics that we're covering. And if you happen to miss any, we welcome you to hit up the website at valoratech.com. And there you will find all the recordings and slides from the past webinars for this year. So welcome. If you are new to Valora, just a little bit about us. We offer an auto classification platform for information governance and lifecycle management. So our platform leverages auto classification technology and machine learning to help in the to automate the discovery, identification, and then the defensible disposition of content, regardless of where it lives across the enterprise. It's mostly used by information governance teams or records and IM teams, sometimes legal and compliance, to not only bring multiple enterprise systems together in one spot, but so that you can handle and manage multiple information governance use cases as well under one umbrella and kind of through one single pane of glass or one single platform. So that's a little bit about us. When you register, we ask you kind of what your interests are and kind of what's worrying you this year. And we've got a lot of folks from Records and IM on the webinar today, so thank you very much for joining us. And what's interesting, we always ask, what are your challenges, or what are your challenges that you're facing this year? And usually it's, oh my God, everything. But it was very interesting this time to see very close between rot and file cleanup and AI readiness was the most on people's minds this time, which was really interesting to see, which is totally in line with what we're hearing from industry as well. So you're in good company today. So welcome and thank you for joining us. Some housekeeping before we get started. We will have Q&A as we go. I can't see it, but I will get myself up so I am able to see it in a second. Please ask questions as we go. Whoever's speaking, we'll interrupt and ask the question at the time. Or if you'd like to save it to the end, we will have a Q&A after the session is over. After this webinar, probably by tomorrow morning in your inbox, you will see a link to the recording and the slides as well. And feedback. We would love your feedback. If there's something that you'd like to see us talk about next time or any feedback for these sessions, we would absolutely welcome them. So in our agenda today, we are talking about unhostaging your data. So we're going to talk about what is hostage data and how to unhostage it, and how that hostaging of the data really plays into that bigger picture of information governance, and then how to prevent future hostaging attempts in the future. So it's going to be it's a really interesting topic, and one that we've heard a lot of in industry. So with that, Sandy, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, great. So I don't know if we invented this as a verb, hostaging or unhostaging, but it's very descriptive and I like it a lot. Everybody immediately understands what we're talking about. But just in case that wasn't completely obvious to you, let us sort of define what we mean by data being hostage. Basically, there's a kind of severe version of that, and then there's an almost casual, almost unintentional version of that. But basically, data is hostage when you are still, you meaning either you as information governance or you as the organization, are responsible for that data, but it is one way or another, or many ways, inaccessible to you. So that can be, what do we mean by inaccessible? It might mean that you just don't know what it is and you have no way of finding out. It might mean that, oh, there's a way to find out, all right, pay us $20 million and we'll tell you, exorbitant costs or effort to do so. Or even this sort of unintentionally of, wow, we laid off everybody who knew what that system was and now nobody can find any data. all of those are examples of a hostage situation. Some, again, some more severe than others. Okay, Jen. So here are just some examples in no particular order. And we're going to talk about the different flavors. In a moment, we're going to talk about essentially a continuum from kind of the lightest grade hostaging to the most severe hostaging. And all of these are somewhere on that continuum. So if you signed on to this webinar early, the original genesis of this topic started with this notion of third-party applications, SaaS applications that are holding your data in their environment or their cloud. But once we kind of got into it and started really investigating this, we realized there were all these other examples of data hostaging, and we couldn't just blame everything on third parties. So while that is certainly true, and we're going to talk about that one in great detail, it is not the only flavor of data hostaging. So just having data in an inaccessible format for some application that you no longer have a right to use or no longer have a permissible password, that is hostage data. You can't use that. It's useless. It's like seeing something you want, an ice cream in a glass refrigerator, but you can't get the door open, or I guess freezer, and you can't get the door open, then it is inaccessible to you. So all of the things on this list are versions of hostage data. And the key thing that makes the hostaging situation problematic is the cost or the pain or the inaccessibility of the data, plus the need to do so. If it's just garbage and nobody cares, then that's not that severe a situation. Like you want to hold my, my compost heap hostage, be my guest. But it's because there is suspected value or you don't know, there's unknown risk, there is a need to get at that information. So that is the combination that makes the hostage data situation, that responsibility tied to inaccessibility. And the sad thing is, and I mean, I'm preaching to the choir for all of you information governance folks, is that you can still own the information and still have it be completely inaccessible and ungovernable. That is a very sad state of affairs, but the world is changing there. It's not just hand-wring anymore. We do have abilities to unhostage data. We're going to get into that today. And we do have, I would say, kind of tailwinds helping us along with, the rise in privacy concerns and penalties, the rise of AI. We're going to talk about how these tailwinds are kind of preaching the values of information governance and making the arguments that we've been making for decades, they're making them for us. Okay, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to figure out where my Q&A and questions were. Got it.
Oh, and I wanted to give a very practical example. I'm going to talk in a minute about friendly hostaging versus unfriendly hostaging. There are both, and there's kind of an in-between sort of indifferent hostaging. I don't know if any of you out there use Google Photos to share and store your photos. We do as a family with our far-flung family. And if you do that, you will soon find that you can only use your Google Photos inside the Google universe because it's in some kind of weird cuckoo format that if you wanted to do anything else with them, you have to, I don't know, transmogrify them into some other format. That's a perfect example of hostaging. Why has Google done that? I mean, maybe there's a really good technical reason, but the sort of business cynic in me says it's to keep me tied to Google where those photos are valid. Okay, so that's just a sort of simple, non-businessy example of data hostaging. Okay, so how does data become hostage in the first place? There are a lot of ways, and that's part of why it's proliferating, because it's kind of coming at us from all angles. First of all, systems age out, people age out, either they retire or they are asked to retire. And no one remembers or has access or understands what the heck that system was for 20 years ago, or it was part of an M&A, and nobody here today has anything to do with the company that it originally created that. So there's that just sort of general aging out, forgetting kind of reason. And then there's the more insidious, the kind of intentional barriers that are put in place, like speed bumps, specifically to slow you down or cause you trouble and make it more difficult. We're going to talk more about that one in a minute. There are also sort of like, I'll call it the unintended consequences, things like increasing security or privacy concerns that have organizations locking down data from everybody, which is also preventing the people who need to get in there to handle retention, to go ahead and delete things past retention, to go ahead and take things off of legal hold. Now you have no ability to do so because you've been locked out suddenly. So there's, again, sort of competing agendas. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then, of course, the one that everybody thinks of, if I first said to you, your data is being held hostage, probably you're immediately thinking of a breach and ransomware. Yes, of course, that is a version of hostaging. It's the most severe version of hostaging, but it's not the only one. And we're going to look at that continuum. Okay, Jen. So I just mentioned this. There's kind of a sad, vicious cycle that happens inside our organizations. And this is the version, and this is the, by the way, the bulk of data hostage is self-inflicted. Yes, you can be breached and have ransomware. I hope that never happens to you, but unfortunately, the odds are it probably will. But self-inflicted hostaging is going on in every which direction, and that is because of competing agendas in the workplace. So, you have legal saying preserve it, you have security saying, all right, the safest thing is lock everybody out. IT doesn't want to mess with an application until it's end of life, and then everybody starts screaming, no, 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 don't delete it, right? We have all these conflicting agendas that are just effectively, as a whole organization, kind of chasing their tail, and that is effectively locking out intelligent access to the systems. It's locking out programmatic access, and it is absolutely keeping things longer than they need to be kept because there's no way to not do so. So the ultimate sort of takeaway is that no one party in this group, and by the way, that party should be you, information governance, has enough knowledge or authority to be able to go, that's it. It ends here. We're deleting it. It's 25 years old. We're getting rid of it. That is where, if you've been to our webinars before, you've heard either of us speak, we're huge proponents at raising the profile of information governance for precisely this kind of reason. Okay, Jen, take us over to the continuum. So I personally, as I was evaluating this whole area and thinking about how to present to you all, found it very helpful to think about this as a continuum. So there's sort of this notion of friendly hostaging, which is sort of like things just kind of got hostaged unintentionally, and moving into the more intentional, more bad actors where, yeah, I darn well intend to hostage you. You bet I do. So let's take a look at what that feels like. So if you take, the abandoned file share or the abandoned SharePoint sites or that old inherited M&A data, again, there weren't bad actors per se trying to go, ha, let's make data nobody can have. But that is what resulted, and now it's sitting in the lap of information governance, and it is sitting there as a liability. It's a liability for discovery, it's another vector for breach, and it's another kind of unregulated free-for-all for AI. We have been banging those drums for a while now. I'll just bang them again, shall I? All right. Then we have as a slightly moving slightly more unfriendly end of life. Why do we say slightly more unfriendly? Because there's likely to be pushback here. Now there's somebody probably has an incentive for the status quo. In the abandoned situation, part of the problem is no one has any incentive whatsoever. It's just like an orphan. In the end of life system, at the very least, probably the vendor of that system has some incentive to kind of keep you stuck to it. So it can be a little bit more unfriendly. We're going to investigate that a little closer in just a moment. Kind of moving down now we get into that third party where the system or the application or the data doesn't even live necessarily in your environment. It's living with them. So not only do they have incentives to kind of slow you down or keep you stuck, they have the ability to do so. So that's we're kind of crossing over onto the unfriendly or potentially unfriendly. And then, of course, the most unfriendly where, yes, I'm going to take control of your data and prevent you from using it on purpose explicitly to hold you hostage and make you pay. So you will soon hear that we should have made this arrow gray, because this is a gray zone between these points. These are not discrete. It's not like I'm a level 3, I'm a level 4. No, it's a pretty smooth gradient. There are some very, I would say, hostile business practices that I don't think you would label as ransomware, but close. And so you can see as you move along this spectrum, we're going to use this spectrum a lot throughout this webinar. You'll see that at the left edge, the frequency of occurrence is high. Everybody has this situation. It's just not that complex or unusual. The costs are lower to remediate them. The kind of technical integrations are easier. Mostly they're well-intentioned actors and just overall lower hurdles. As we move to the right, costs increase. Bad intentions increase. There are more obstacles, higher hurdles. Hopefully it's less common, but unclear exactly. And then in the middle, you have sort of it's not as terrible as it could be, but it's not as good as it could be. You have kind of indifferent actors, and that is its own problem. Information governance has been fighting indifference for a long time. Sometimes you get more attention. Litigation folks, all you eDiscovery folks know this. You're the squeaky wheel, right? You get attention because it's crisis, crisis, crisis. Indifference can be a difficult foe, and that's why I wanted to call that out. So I do want to just make one point, which is obviously ransomware is the most severe version of hostaging. We are not really going to talk about that per se today, because that is an entire area of discipline. We're happy to talk about that maybe on another webinar. If you guys would like a webinar where we bring in a breach expert, ransomware expert, and talk explicitly, like how Valora and auto classification, all that might be used specifically for ransomware, let us know that in the comments and we will put together a separate webinar. But for the purposes of this webinar, the ransomware is really there as a bookend to say this is the most severe version of hostaging. And if you understand ransomware and kind of what's going on there, now take that mirror and aim it at all these other kind of lesser versions and just see how similar and how damaging the rest of them are. Are they as bad as ransomware? No. Are they good? No. They're definitely a lot like ransomware, and that's why I wanted to call it out. But this will not be a webinar about what to do in a data breach. Okay, so one of the key things on really kind of understanding hostaging is to recognize that we're going to put on here 4 kind of core concepts that are related, are not actually the same. And the first is ownership. We're talking about data ownership. So who, as a party, who owns the data? When you give data, documents, customer tickets, contracts into a third-party SaaS system, let's say Salesforce, whatever it is you're storing your stuff in, Jira, okay? Who owns that data? You or them? almost always it's you. It's your data. You created it. You have the responsibility for it. You put it there. It's your data. But it's important to mention that because it doesn't always feel like that. And you're gonna feel that tension the more we get through this continuum and the more we talk in this webinar. Tied to sort of ownership is this notion of access. Access really means who can get at that data and get, here we go again. What does get mean, Sandy? There's a difference between you can see the data and there's a difference between seeing and doing something with that data. So be careful because a lot of vendors and third-party situations will say things to you like, you have perfect access to the data. You can see anything you want. Okay, but can I do anything? Can I retention manage it? Can I delete it? Okay, we're going to get into that. So the difference between these two boxes, ownership is really almost like a contractual party versus party. And what are the parties' obligations to the data? Access is who the person, the user, can get in there and what are they permitted to do? What permissions do they have with this data? Next, we go into control, okay? So this is where we're moving one over from I can see the data to I can do something to that data. I can delete it. I can change its properties. I can lock it down. I can redact it. I can remove it. And very importantly, we put this under control. I can bulk manipulate the data. This is going to be a really big concept, and it's relatively new. It used to be we would put data into systems, 1Z, 2Z. Maybe we want to make a change, 1Z, 2Z. That is no longer the case. When do we want to deal with bulk? Well, we have an M&A. We just acquired a company. Here's 30,000 contracts. That is a bulk situation. Or we want to migrate from this application to this application. That's a bulk manipulation of data. Some of the other things that would fit that bill, we want to run a DLP or a security check on all of that data. And everybody's favorite two vowels, we want to run AI. That's going to be a bulk manipulation of data in any regard. And oh, by the way, over here, your friendly information governance auto classification vendor, you bet we want to run in bulk. And so as soon as you start having this kind of bulk processing on data, you're talking about control. You've kind of crossed the access barrier and you're into control. This is going to become a big, big topic in a minute. And then we have governance. So how do we ensure that we're accurately and promptly deleting stuff that's reached its end of life? How can we dictate what should be used by users, but AI? How do we account for changing situations? We now have a new regulation we are responsible to. How do we change the data locked away in that system over there to be compliant? We have to have access. We have to have controls on the data, even though we're working through a third party potentially. So it's very important to understand these four areas and the interplay of them, and that all four are essential in a modern kind of governance situation for any data, anywhere, what I'll call your enterprise data estate. That includes software you own. It includes SaaS software you rent or are storing data in. It includes cloud systems. It's what you're responsible for. So I'll stop there, Jen, just in case any questions have come up. That's probably a good question.
There are no questions. Yeah, we're good right now, unless somebody wants to ask me right now.
Fantastic. All right. So now let's just hammer home the notion of data hostaging. The absolute just crown princes of data hostaging are Iron Mountain.
And you knew there was going to be finger pointing. You knew it. You knew it coming.
Well, you know, if anyone from Iron Mountain is on this call, I have been pointing my finger at you for over a decade on this. This is not a new thing coming out of my mouth. Where essentially, and we all know it, we all lived it, right? You give Iron Mountain your paper, and then they charge you every time you want your own paper back. There's a cost to retrieve the paper back. Oh no, okay, I'm done, Iron Mountain, take it back. It's a cost to put it back. And you know what? I don't ever need this paper again. There's a cost to shred the paper, on and on and on. And it's just, this is in addition to sort of a monthly rental fee just to keep your data on the shelf in the safe, protected environment. I'm not trying to say Iron Mountain doesn't offer a viable service, a very helpful, useful service. Absolutely, yes. I am dinging them a little bit on the sort of hostaging elements of the way they charge people for their own data when they're already charging people for their own data. It's literally.
Sandy, there's a comment that says, where's the clapping icon or the amen?
Oh, I think you can do that. Yeah, there it is. Good job. Thank you. It's literally the coming and going, like you're what's that expression? You get it coming and going. So yes, I mean, Iron Mountain are absolutely, kind of the progenitors of this technique. However, that was physical. It is now this sort of identical thing is happening in digital, but it's much worse. So, and now I'm going to pick on iManage a little bit, only because we keep banging into this one. They are hardly the only ones with this behavior, where once again, they're going to charge you to host the data for whatever business purpose you've signed on to this SaaS app, whether iManage or anybody else. And they're going to charge you, right? They're going to charge you storage fees. They're going to charge you monthly user access fees. And then they make it, very easy to add data in. You know who else is like this? M365, a lot like this, right? Real easy to add data in. Very difficult to change the data once it's there or delete it or move it, right? They're building in those roadblocks, those obstacles to make it difficult for you to change. And they've added a new wrinkle here called throttling. So throttling is essentially if you try to do too many actions too quickly in succession, they will prevent you from doing so. It's kind of like if you think of like a funnel and you're pouring liquid down the funnel, they go, and they make the funnel really small and suddenly it's dripping out instead of pouring out. And that's throttling. They have the ability to do that because they own the infrastructure. And so that is a way, again, it's like throwing a roadblock in front of you. It's making it more difficult to do things in bulk. Remember, we just talked a minute ago about all those reasons why you kind of want to be able to bulk process your data. AI going me, right? That's where the throttling is coming from. It is costing the SaaS provider every time you hit it and run a query and do something, it's costing them processing power. So they can either charge you for that the way, Claude or OpenAI, the way they would charge you, or they could just throttle you down and, you just go and drip, drip, drip. And so it effectively prevents you from being able to do this bulk work. So this kind of thing is generally known as switching costs. We know this. This is like a long-time economic concept that is built in on purpose to deter you from making changes, to try and keep you in the status quo. And it reminds me of an ad. I'm going to date myself now. So all you Gen Xers, this is for you. There was a TV ad when I was a kid about like if you had roaches or cockroaches in your house, and it was called the Roach Motel, and the roaches check in, but they never check out. Like that is exactly what is happening. They want you to check your roaches, which are your documents here, in, and they never check out, and they just keep charging you. That today we have a great fun word that we call stickiness, and that again. Iron Mountain really pioneered this out of sight, out of mind. Nobody thinks about the paper that's been sitting in a mountain for 30 years because it's out of sight, out of mind. That doesn't work so well in a digital environment. We're still responsible for that data, and it can still be attacked much more in a much more dangerous way than you'd probably have to dynamite the mountain. It's just a different scenario. So what this is promoting is the very opposite of vigilant governance. It's sort of set it and forget it. Don't think too hard. Don't work too hard. Don't rock the boat. Don't try to do anything. You tell that to AI. Good luck with that. And so basically what you have is that you have no ability to manage your own data, to operate on your own data, or to operate in any kind of bulk way. They are in effect preventing you. They are hostaging your data, either intentionally or unintentionally, and charging you for the privilege. And so the best metaphor, go ahead, Jen, that I can think of to kind of explain this to other people is, and Matt, I don't know how many of you out there rent your home, whether it's a house or an apartment, condo, whatever. But imagine you rent a house and you pay a monthly fee, right? A monthly rent to use the premises, the yard, the garage, the utilities, whatever. And now imagine you had to pay an extra fee that is above and beyond your rent every time you drive up or down the driveway, or every time you use the shower, or open or close the window, they're going to charge you 10 cents. It's almost like my poor daughter, who has a washing machine in the basement of the apartment she rents, and then she has to pay $2.25 for laundry every single time she does laundry. Okay? Now, imagine, in addition to making you pay every time you took a shower, you're only allowed to do it between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m. because that's the low usage time frame when everybody's sleeping. And now it's not a house you rent, it's a house you own that you are being charged on. Okay, when you use this metaphor, you feel sort of instinctively how insidious and how unfair and ridiculous this is. This is not how your own assets should work. They're assets. They're supposed to return value to you, not extract value away from you. And that is what is happening right now. That is data hostaging. And if you don't like my word, go ahead, Jen. You can use Deloitte's word, which is their word is not about hostaging. Their word is about all this kind of throttling and charging, charging you to take the shower. They call it toll gating, and I really liked that. I have the link here. You guys will all receive this. This is the paper where they talk about toll gating, and it is expressly around SaaS applications and AI, and why the applications are starting to toll gate every time you try to do something, whether it's your AI or their AI. It's a gating mechanism, whether it's throttling, charging, restricting the times that you can do it, or just even, you'll sometimes see this, just sort of slowing down the results that you get back, just enough to be annoying, but not enough to make you pick up the phone and complain. So all of that is toll gating, and there's quite an art to it, to how much can we push, how much can we extract before the customer revolts. And I'm suggesting to you, it's time to revolt, because this is unacceptable. It is your own data that they are doing this on. That's what makes it unacceptable. So I highly, highly recommend you take a look at this paper. I found it absolutely fascinating, and the link is there. It's free. And if you like this one, I have another document for you, because don't I always? This is a little bit more on broad enterprise data security, but most of the conversation is about the inaccessibility of data for genuine purposes, whether the purposes are just business functions, I can't find what I'm looking for, or they do kind of call out the governance purposes of, we are trying to get our arms around things and make them properly governed and in compliance and properly retention managed, etc. And how much of their data was just completely inaccessible to this. They're using AI to drive, and I recommend you do it as well, because if the AI can't get to it, neither can you. AI is going to be better off, circumventing, since now it apparently can break out of its confines and find what it needs better than you can. So if the AI can't get there, surely neither can you. So, and you can see those numbers, 50% and higher of the data inside the organization is effectively just inaccessible. And that is obviously not okay. What is starting to happen, though, and we'll see this in a bit, is that some countries and jurisdictions are not taking this line down. This notion of toll gating or throttling or hostaging is becoming increasingly illegal. It's seen as a barrier to fair competition. In other words, I, as the data owner, ought to be able to take my stuff out of AWS and move it to Azure anytime I feel like it. You shouldn't, prevent me from doing so. So there's been a lot of regulation and new laws coming from in the EU, from the EU Data Act. Eventually, I'm hoping we will catch up here in the United States. My guess is we'll do it on a state-by-state level, and I'm looking at you, California, to lead the way, because you typically do. All right, taking us down to, so what, Sandy? Who is harmed by this? If it hasn't been obvious, nearly everybody, and I won't, read you this slide, but basically every corner of the business is harmed directly or indirectly by hostaging, not the least of which, yes, costs being used to unhostage data is money that's not available elsewhere. That affects everyone. But the kind of the pain and the effort and the energy spent in dealing with hostaging makes every one of these kind of tasks on the side here that much harder, or in many cases impossible. So there's the kind of harm up and down the organization. And it does bear asking, well, so who benefits? And the answer is not a whole lot. Yeah, the third party vendor, the SaaS vendor might benefit. I would put it to you, that's a pretty short-term benefit, because sooner or later, you all, the data holders, are going to get annoyed and take your business elsewhere, or you'll find a way, we're going to get to that in just a minute, to work around these constraints. And so it's a very short-lived kind of approach to attempt to, kind of blockade a customer that way. I think it's a big mistake. And often nobody really benefits, and nobody's 100% aware of just the impact of all of this, because they don't even realize that there's a hostage taker or a hostagee. It's just kind of happening, and work is getting harder and more complex, and we know less and less, and we trust less and less. Those are all the kind of, remember I said that middle ground can be very dangerous? That's it right there. All right, so, okay, we got it, Sandy. We're being hostaged. Yes, check. All right, how do we unhostage? So there are a couple ways. There's definitely a right way, and we're going to talk about that in great detail in just a second. But there's also a wrong way, and I want to point that out to you so that you don't go down the path of good intentions. Try to avoid easy fixes that just say, oh, we'll just lift and shift our data out of this, aging environment. We'll put it over there and all will be well and nothing will ever go wrong. That's very naive and very Pollyanna. It's not going to happen. And the real way to do this right is to take the time to actually understand what the data is. The mistake is thinking all data is the same. It's data from an acquisition. It's this, it's that. Who cares? What difference does it make what kind of data it is? I can't even tell you how many times I'll hear that from an IT person. It makes a huge amount of difference. For example, how it should be governed, what retention schedule it's subject to, whether or not it's under legal hold, whether or not there are privacy obligations. What that data is matters. And therefore, how you treat it, how you mitigate the issues matters. So, okay. So the wrong way is the sort of bulk, lift and shift. And, oh, sorry, Jen, go back 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
The other way, the other wrong thing is to just trade off one set of costs for another. So there's a kind of thinking right now of AI will solve it, whatever it is. AI will solve it. You name it, AI will solve it. And the problem is that there's a very naive assumption that all the work that we as humans had been doing, somehow just AI is just going to come along and be more efficient and better at it. It's possible it'll be able to do that, but it doesn't mean it's going to cost any less. What I mean by that is we're going to take essentially human productivity and replace that with tokens and inferences charges. That's the charge that you pay to OpenAI or Claude or whomever because you are chunking through all this data that had never been properly curated. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that in this webinar because that was last month's webinar. Go listen to the July webinar, and you will see that it's not really more cost effective to just go to AI for this. It can be quite a bit more expensive. So those are the wrong ways to do it. All right, Jen, let's go to the right way. Okay, so we're going to take you through some real world examples. Again, on that continuum, we're going to start with kind of the most friendly and get to the most kind of unfriendly that is not yet actually unfriendly ransomware. It's just sort of friendly, or is it? Like, we should call it frenemy hostaging.
Frenemy, yeah.
So we're going to take you through all three of those. Okay, so let's go. There are some commonalities across all manner of unhostaging, so I just want to tackle those first. There are basically two main unhostaging approaches. You can lift, shift, sift. And what that means is basically lift your data from the offending area, shift it over to presumably a less offending area, and then actually deal with it. Lift, shift, sift. That is probably a faster technique, but probably in the beginning anyway, but a more expensive technique because you are shifting over data you probably don't need. You're probably shifting over rot. You're probably shifting over dupes, and you're almost certainly shifting over stuff that is past retention, doesn't need to be shifted at all. It should be appropriately taken out, back, and shut. So that's you're sort of paying for your kind of short-term benefit for long-term pain in the butt. That's that technique. We generally at Valora advocate sift, lift, shift. In other words, curate first, figure out what you have, what you should keep, where it's going to go in the new environment, and then execute. So it's a longer effort up front, but then the push the go button is much faster, and then boom, then your new environment is clean and gorgeous and everything is great. So that's the sift, lift, shift technique. That's almost always what we will recommend, with one big caveat, and we're going to get to that on the second example. So that's the basically one time that we don't do that. So think about which technique you want to use, and it may be different for different kinds of data. But understand that those are the two basic strategies. And then understand that this is going to have to be bulk processing, scale level, programmatic processing. You are not doing this file by file. I won't let you. And so you need some kind of API or SDK or programmatic access to that data. So think about, how is that going to happen that we can deal with that data in bulk? And remember, there may be parties out there that have a vested interest in you not thinking in a bulk way. Okay, so that now we get to the next point. Anticipate your pushback. Be prepared. Okay, you're going to have to allay fears about replacement. Most vendors are going to be concerned if you start asking about bulk migration. And so you want to talk about why and what the time frame and what the rationale and how you plan to do that. Just like you don't want them hiding information from you, you don't want to hide information from them. It should be a partnership. So start to kind of have the out in the open conversations about, how do we govern the data that you are holding, Mr. Vendor? How do we let our AI get access to that data when we want to operate on it in bulk at scale? Okay, so start thinking about what you want and what arguments you're going to put forth when they push back. And specifically ask about throttling. Most vendors won't say, here's our fabulous SaaS service, here's how it works, and by the way, this is the throttling that you get. You have to ask that one, and the salesperson may not even know. You may have to dig a little bit on that. You definitely want to ask, because you want to start thinking about things in a bulk processing manner. So ask about throttling, ask about choke points. How many transactions can we conduct a day? How many files can we operate on at a time in a session? Are we blocked off from doing that at any point during the workday? Is there a maximum amount of data we can touch or move or use in a day? These are the kinds of questions you want to start asking. That's what I mean by either anticipating pushback or kind of finding where the edges are. So these are commonalities for any approach, for any hostaging situation. These are kind of where you need to kind of prepare. All right, let's go into example one. So the abandoned file share. Everybody has them, whether they admit it or not. And the good news is, while that's the most common situation, it's also the easiest one to unhostage. So really all you need to unhostage is to be able to get some kind of access to the file share. So since we're going to be using programmatic access, the ideal situation is a service account. A service account is basically it's like a user account, but it's expressly for a bot or an agent, not an AI agent, software agent, to be able to access the data at scale, super fast, kind of like, if you were pressing the mouse button really fast, to be able to operate at scale. That's all you need, really, to clean up your file share. What I recommend that you do is, once you have access, go in and have a manual, go in and have a manual look around. How much data is in there? Just, ballpark. Is it 100 gigabytes or is it, 50 petabytes? What kind of stuff is in there? Can you more or less recognize the file extensions, or what is this kooky stuff? Approximately, when was it last accessed or last edited? Was it, a year ago or 20 years ago? Those matter. Those are going to affect how you think about this data, how much effort you're going to want to put into it, how much cost, and what kind of tools you want to use. So just have a manual look around. Don't spend more than half an hour, but poke around. All right. Ultimately, you are going to need a connector, because the connector is the magic. Thank you, Jen. That lets you operate programmatically. I kind of sometimes think of a connector like almost like robotic surgery. Like, you're the surgeon, you're out here, and there's this tiny little robot in there, and you're going doot 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 doot, and it's taking out the appendix of the patient, with these robotic tools, whatever. Same thing. The connector is just a small little piece of software. It's sometimes called an agent. It's not an AI, not agentic AI. That's over there. Unfortunate use of the same word. A piece of software that basically uses APIs. An API is an application programming interface. That an API is usually written by a software provider, like a Salesforce or Google or Box or OneDrive, to allow other systems to come in safely and access data. Okay, that sounds a lot like what we're trying to do here. So a connector is that little piece of software that's like, hi, API, I'm here to do things. It respects the paradigms of the API. It's a good citizen. If there is throttling in play, it respects the throttling, and it's operating on the content that is in the application or the repository through this safe doorway, this API. That's what a connector is. They can be read-only. In other words, it's just going in and going, oh, what you got, and then leaving. Or it can be writing if you intend to keep that environment, but you just want to add information to it, like, is this rot, or what's the retention on this file? Then you might want a write capability into that environment. And so you have read-only, write-only, and read and write, depending on what you're trying to do. That your connector will be one of those three. And I'll just stop for a second, Jen. Any questions have come up so far before we go?
No.
And will you go back to example one?
Yeah. Example one.
Thank you. All right. So we were sort of up to the connector. So make sure you have permissions. Go in and have a little peek around. Make sure you have an operating connector, and then pull a statistical sample, okay? You do not need to run on every file in the file share to understand how this is going to work. You take a reasonable sample. My recommendation, 5% or less. That will be a statistically valid sample, and see what it tells you. What did we pull out? Kind of like core, what do we call those things? Like core sample. Go in and say, okay, here's what we've kind of gotten here. Pull that sample, have a look at it, and by the way, run some processing benchmarks. How long does it take to get a file? How long does it take to render? How much of this is rot? How much, what's the average file size? Those are going to be useful markers to help you figure out how much processing power, how much time, how much cost, how much energy it's going to take to do the entire corpus of that file share. So sampling is great. It's going to give you a ton of information for very low cost. It kind of lends itself to a piloting situation. And indeed at Valora, that is very much how we get started with clients. But that's what I would recommend to anybody is start with a statistical sample on that data. Figure out what you've got and then configure your processing, your high volume processing, to meet the status of the data. Okay, this is really important. Don't run extra processes that you don't need on that data. If everything in that file share was publicly facing, marketing materials, you probably don't have to spend a lot of time and effort looking for, PII or personal health information. It's not going to be there. Could you? Sure. Is that more safe? Yes. Is it worth the processing power? Possibly not. Again, how old is that data? How valuable is it? What's the downside? That's your job as the thinker in all of this, to figure out the kind of the cost benefit. Similarly, do you have any idea what's in there? Could it be the kitchen sink? In that case, maybe you want to run a lot of different kind of processing just in case, because you don't know what your risk or exposure is. So that's what I mean. You want to meet the status of the data, and the core sampling will give you a really good view into what the status of that data is. Okay, and then also, all right, we'll get, so now you're ready, you know what you have, you know what's an appropriate amount of processing and types of processing to do, you know what it's going to take in terms of, kind of processing cycles and time and cost. So then, boom, now we're going to run at high scale. That's what you want, where right? Your connector is full on. And so that will ultimately, after processing each file, come up with this notion, what we call it Valora RFL, recommended file location. And that's a little bit of a misnomer, because it's not just this is where this file belongs. It's also this is what needs to happen to that file. This needs to be locked down. This contains sensitive data. This is past retention. This is under legal hold. This is in Chinese, whatever. Okay, and it ascribes these 60, 80 different fields of metadata to each file that then say, okay, this file is ready to continue on its journey, whether its journey is through the graveyard or elsewhere, out of the abandoned file share, let's say. So that is kind of the whole system. And then I wanted to warn you, because there's different things to watch out for in each of these examples. In the file share, you want to watch out for ancient and unlifted legal holds. A legal hold from 20 years ago, really? Unreasonable territoriality is organization going, no, it's my data, you can't have it. And the black market data stash. People have always used the file share as a safe place to store questionable information, illegal copies of their emails, so to avoid the automatic, 120-day slice out. Porn stash, you name it, whatever it is, the unsavory is going to be in that file share. So watch out for that. Okay, example 2, and I realize we're kind of coming up on the hour. Uh-oh.
Yeah, we are.
I'll try to be quick. So take us to example 2, Jen. All right, so this is the end of life application, a little bit different than the file share because it's an application. And the first thing you want to determine is, who owns this application? Did your organization buy it outright? It's a software asset. Then you probably have certain kinds of rights to manipulate it. Or is it really more of a SaaS situation? Who owns it? Who owns the data? Where does it reside? How easy is it to get in there? And then the same process. Yes, get a service account. If for some reason that's not possible, remember I said there's one situation where you may not want to sift, then lift, then shift? This is it, which is if the reason that the application is end of lifing is because the vendor themselves is ending support for this ancient, probably, application, it may not be possible to get in with a service account. There may not be a modern API or any way into that data, in which case it is time for the bulk download. Get everything out of that environment, put it someplace safe. So this is the one situation where we actually advocate for a lift, shift, sift technique because it's kind of the only option. So that may be the case in the end of life. It's common. And then the process is kind of the same. Once either we got the data in a pile over here or we have programmatic access to it where it's currently living via API or what have you. Same thing, do your sample, meet the status of the data, run at scale, determine what you're keeping, where it goes, all its attributes, come up with a migration plan for sure in this case, and then other things to watch out for that may be slightly different than before, proprietary file formats, particularly in older software, potential data loss or degradation that's just happened over time. Nobody noticed because nobody's accessed it for 20 years. You'll find out now. And an inability to collect. There's sometimes no way to get any metadata or stuff that's stored within that system, and it's going to die with that system. That's something you'd like to know before it happens. Okay, number 3, the frenemy.
The frenemy. And you know what, Sandy, we've got 2 minutes, but I think what we'll do for everybody who's on the call, we'll continue through. It will probably be maybe 5 minutes past the hour. So if you'd like to stay, please do. And if not, then we will certainly send the recording. If you have to jet off to another call, we'll send the recording out afterwards.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, take your time.
All right, so this is the one that, again, sort of initiated this whole concept, which is the frenemy vendor that is making it harder and more costly and more uncomfortable to try and programmatically access your own data inside their environment. So the new wrinkle here is throttling, where they will throttle you in what you're trying to do, either overtly or covertly. And so all the more reason you want to do the same thing again. Almost certainly, by the way, in these SaaS situations, they're a lot more modern. They almost certainly have an API. Whether they publish that and advertise that is another story, but absolutely ask. I would say 90% of SaaS applications have a programmatic API somewhere. So you definitely want to ask, and how do you get it? You may have to pay for it, but it almost certainly exists, which means it is possible to programmatically access your data. So that's a key element of this whole unhostaging technique. So make sure you can do it. And if you can't, then you resort to the plan B, which is dump it out. All right. Same thing, go through. Big difference this time is the throttling. So you're not only going to run sort of internal processing benchmarks, how fast did it take, how long to open a file, what's a typical file like. You're also going to watch for throttling. When did the throttle hit? Does it happen after 50,000 calls, 5 calls? Does it happen at 4 in the morning? There's all different ways throttling manifests. It can be time-based. It can be number of calls based. It can be size of call based. Watch your build. Did your build change when you started analyzing? That's a key. So you want to just kind of watch and look. And I hate to say this, but start behaving a little bit more like a bad actor. Okay, that's what bad actors do. People think you just get breached one night. That is not the case. They've been watching you, kind of casing your environment for months and months, and watching your behavior and seeing when are you vigilant, when are you not, what's going to cause the least amount of suspicion. You want to kind of behave like that here. That's what your pilot or your statistical sample is about. It's not just about the data anymore and the processing. It's also about when are you going to bang into these roadblocks that they've put up. relatively recently. So again, part of any kind of core sampling here needs to also include where are the walls that third party has set up. So the difference now we want to configure the processing, yes, to meet the status of the data, of course, yes, but also any access limitations. Did you find during your sampling that their throttling kicks in at 9 a.m.? Great, stop processing at 8:58. Okay, so there's all kinds of ways. It's like a little arms race between those who would unhostage and those who would hostage you. It's like a little arms race like this, and you just keep out manipulating each other. And then, yes, run it. Once you figure all of that out, you should be able to run at high scale and just, throttle kicks in at 9 a.m., and we're down at 8:58, right? I always have this vision of we're doing acrobats through the lasers that are protecting the diamond, which is your data, and so we're able to do the back flip and grab the data and come out. And then same thing, determine what your bulk plan is going to be. Is it a migration plan? Is it just a retention plan within these parameters, et cetera? Same thing, watch out for those custom formats, for the inability, either technically or contractually. Who owns that metadata, you or them? Definitely find out. And are they going to charge you egress fees? That's that toll gating, right? In addition to throttling. Okay, so we're coming to the end now. All right, so now that you're well versed in what hostaging is and how to get out of it, this is how to prevent hostaging in the future. So understand that hostaging is really kind of the flip side of the coin of governance debt. It is because every time we defer classification or disposition or what have you, we're building governance debt down the line that some later party is going to have to deal with. We are the later party from 25 years of kind of neglect. And the same thing is true every time we kick the can on any of this. So eventually that debt becomes a constraint and becomes a hostage situation. That is where we are now. So my kind of number one tactical skill here is to make what's called exit readiness. And that's exit readiness of the data itself, because it's hitting its life cycle. It doesn't have to mean en masse, bulk departure. It might just mean each file as it comes due. But make that a core IG requirement for all new applications, all systems, all data uses, looking at UAI, and all renewals, okay? So ask the questions out loud. What is the intended life cycle and disposition of this data? Don't just dump it into the third party without having that conversation internally and then with them to make sure that you will be able to do the things you want to do down the line. How will we use it in bulk? Are we expecting AI to be able to get at that? Are we expecting to retention manage it? I hope you say yes, etc. Will we need it to ever get in there for, a litigation pull? Probably. So have those conversations before you sign up with these vendors, and then require this in your contract negotiations, right? You want to maintain bulk export rights. You want to maintain access to that metadata. You want permission to use the API. You want them to build an API if they haven't. And if they haven't, shame on them. What century are they living in? Et cetera, et cetera. Don't negotiate merely for the ownership of the data. Negotiate for your continuing ability to govern it. In other words, to access it in a bulk programmatic scaled way. Sure that you can do all these things to your very own data without being throttled, without being charged, and without being penalized in some way. It's your data. All right, Jen. And then finally, here's the test. Notably, the ones with the little checklist on the right. When you are considering a new application, a new repository, a renewal of an existing one, these are the questions to ask. Can we inventory what the heck is in there? Can we find rot within there? Can we apply retention? Can we do classification? Can we export it? Can we run AI on it? If the answer to all of that is yes, then well done. You've done a great job. And if the answer is no, or I'm not sure, You are not done negotiating, because if you don't answer those questions, you are literally kicking the can to the next generation of InfoGov people that are going to have to deal with the same kind of mess that we're dealing with now from our predecessors. And that is basically the end of the story today. Thank you all for staying over. We do have the takeaway, which is basically governance isn't really, we've talked about this before, but the change from observational governance to operational governance. It is not just knowing what you have, it is the ability to actually manage that information and manage it at scale. If you can't manage it in scale, you are hostaged. And I highly recommend you take steps to unhostage so that you maintain that essential practical ability to act on your data. And that is today's webinar.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy. I cannot see the questions and answers or the chat, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in here. And thank you very much for those who stayed over the hour. We had a lot to cover today. We certainly packed that hour in. So I thank you for your time and your attention. And you will receive these slides and a copy of the webinar in your inbox tomorrow. And if you do have any questions for us directly, here's our email addresses. We would love to hear from you. Either questions directly or any feedback would be welcome as well. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next month.